What if I told you that the difference between financial ruin and unimaginable wealth has absolutely nothing to do with your IQ, or like your formal education,
Hmm.
or even just a lucky roll of the cosmic dice?
Right. It's entirely internal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine for a moment that you are standing at a crossroads. Down one path lies this life of constant, exhausting struggle. A life of quiet desperation where you're always wondering how to make ends meet, feeling like you're perpetually at the mercy of circumstances you just can't control.
Yeah, the daily grind.
But then, down the other path lies a life of profound success, absolute financial independence, and complete mastery over your own fate. And the crazy thing is that the gap between those two paths isn't some massive inheritance.
No, not at all.
It is a single hidden formula, a very specific set of psychological gears that you can literally install into your own mind right now.
Which completely disrupts how we are taught to view success, doesn't it? I mean, we are so conditioned to believe that achievement is this external lottery.
Oh, totally.
But the premise we are exploring today in this deep dive suggests that the machinery of achievement is something you can disassemble, study, and rebuild within your own consciousness.
So today, we are opening up an unprecedented 25-year study. We are looking at the distilled experiences of over 500 of the wealthiest, most successful people in American history. People who started with absolutely nothing. I mean, no money, no influence, no elite degrees, and built monumental empires.
The fabled Andrew Carnegie formula.
Right. But listen, if you were expecting some dry historical recounting of industrial wealth, you're in the wrong place. Our mission in this deep dive is to talk about rewiring the human mind. We are going to explore how to shift your brain from a failure consciousness into a success consciousness.
Which requires a really fundamental paradigm shift for the listener, because what we are really examining today is the anatomy of human potential. We are looking at the mechanical, psychological process of how an intangible, invisible thought can actually transmute itself into physical reality. How does a mere idea become a skyscraper, or, a new industry, or a vast personal fortune?
Well, every great fortune, every major human achievement begins with the exact same intangible spark. And our sources define this spark not as a hope, and certainly not as just a wish, but as a definite desire.
And there is a massive psychological chasm between just wishing for something and truly desiring it in the way this formula demands.
Sarcasm, yeah.
The material introduces us to a concept that sounds deceptively simple. Thoughts are things, but they are incredibly powerful magnetic things when they are mixed with definiteness of purpose, unrelenting persistence, and a burning desire. A wish is passive. A burning desire is an active, all-consuming psychological state. It forces the mind to hunt for solutions.
I want to ground this immediately in a story that just blew my mind, the story of Edwin C. Barnes, because his story is the perfect, visceral illustration of this spark.
Oh, the Edison story.
Yes. Picture this scenario. The guy has no money, none. He literally has to travel by freight train riding in the blind baggage car.
Wow.
Meaning he's essentially clinging to the outside of a train covered in soot and grime just to get to Orange, New Jersey.
Not exactly a luxury commute.
No, he looks like a tramp. He has little education and absolutely zero influence. But he has one thing, a burning obsession to become a business associate of the great inventor, Thomas A. Edison.
And the specificity of that desire is the crucial variable here. He didn't want to work for Edison.
Right.
He didn't want just any job sweeping floors in the Edison laboratory. He wanted to work with Edison as a peer. He wanted to be his business partner.
Which is incredibly audacious.
It is, but that is the definiteness of purpose at work. Ambiguity is the enemy of achievement. If Barnes had just wanted a good job, he would have settled for the first decent paycheck he found.
So he walks into Edison's lab looking like a total hobo. And years later, Edison actually reflected on that exact moment. He said that even though Barnes looked like an ordinary tramp, there was something in the expression of his face that showed he was determined to get what he came for.
But Edison didn't just hand him a partnership, right?
Oh, definitely not. He gave him a sweeping job, working for a nominal wage. To anyone else, to your average person, this would look like an insulting failure. You might think, I came here to be a partner and I'm pushing a broom. I'm out of here.
Yeah, time to quit.
But to Barnes, he was exactly where he needed to be. He was inside the building.
Because Barnes was exhibiting a state of mind that had literally burned all bridges of retreat. He didn't say to himself, well, I'll try this for a few months, and if I don't get promoted, I'll go become a salesman somewhere else.
No backup plan.
Exactly. He told himself he would stay in that building and achieve that partnership if it took the rest of his natural life. That is the white heat of desire. It is a psychological trick you play on yourself. By eliminating any backup plan, you force your brain into a state of absolute necessity. You trigger your survival instincts, but you attach them to your goal.
And he had to maintain that heat for months. I mean, nothing changed for a long time. He was just a guy sweeping floors. But then opportunity snuck in, disguised as a problem.
It usually does.
Right. Edison invents this new dictating machine, eventually called the Ediphone. Edison's own salespeople absolutely hate it. They think it's this clunky piece of machinery that will never sell.
So they basically give up on it.
Exactly. But Barnes doesn't see a clunky machine. He sees his shot. He walks up to Edison and says, I can sell this. Edison gives us the chance, and Barnes sells it so aggressively, so effectively, that he eventually gets a national distribution contract. The slogan literally becomes, made by Edison and installed by Barnes.
Incredible.
He literally thought himself into a multi-million-dollar partnership with the greatest inventor on Earth.
Which contrasts so sharply with another narrative in our research, the story of R.U. Darby and his uncle.
Oh man, this story.
Yeah, if Barnes shows us the power of an indestructible desire, the Darby story is a masterclass in what happens when that burning desire is extinguished by the illusion of defeat.
The 3 feet from gold story. It is just gut-wrenching when you really think about the math of it.
So painful.
Darby's uncle gets gold fever during the rush. He heads west, stakes a claim, starts digging with a pick and shovel, and actually strikes a vein of ore. But to get the gold out in meaningful quantities, he needs heavy machinery. So he quietly covers up the mine, goes back to Maryland, and raises the capital from relatives and neighbors, including young R.U. Darby.
Right, they pool their money.
They ship the machinery out to Colorado. And the first car of ore they pull out proves they have one of the richest mines in the entire state. They are on the verge of clearing millions.
Then the unthinkable happens. The vein of gold simply disappears. They are drilling into empty rock.
It's dirt.
Just dirt. They keep drilling, desperate to pick up the vein again, pouring more time and money into the ground. And eventually, the psychological toll breaks their desire. They decide to quit.
They sell all this expensive, heavy machinery to a local junk man for a few $100s.
A few $100s.
And they take the train home in absolute crushing defeat.
But here's where the story pivots. The junk man isn't just a guy who buys scrap. He is strategic. He calls in a mining engineer to look at the mine. The engineer looks at the fault lines, does the geological math, and calculates that the vein of gold didn't vanish. It just shifted.
Oh, his part hurts.
He calculates that the new vein is exactly 3 feet from where the Darbys stopped drilling. 3 feet. The junk man pulls millions of dollars out of that mine. Not because he worked harder than the Darbys, but because he sought expert counsel instead of surrendering to temporary defeat.
It forces us to define the nature of defeat itself, doesn't it? I mean, the material emphasizes a brutal truth. Before success comes into any person's life, they are absolutely guaranteed to meet with temporary defeat and perhaps massive failure.
Guaranteed.
When defeat overtakes a person, the easiest, most logical, and most socially acceptable thing to do is quit. That is what the majority of people do. But Darby, to his immense credit, learned the core lesson.
He did.
He spent the rest of his life in the life insurance business, and he used that colossal failure as his psychological fuel. Every time a client said no to him, he refused to walk away, remembering that he had surrendered 3 feet from gold. And he became one of the few people to sell over $1 million in life insurance annually.
Which is a huge achievement.
Yeah.
But I have to push back here, though.
Okay, lay out money.
Let's really analyze this. It sounds incredibly romantic, maybe even bordering on magical thinking. If you were listening to this on your morning commute, you might be thinking, it's just wanting it really enough. If I just sit on my couch and desire $1 million with a white heat, the universe isn't going to just drop a duffel bag of cash through my ceiling.
No, of course not. And that is a dangerous misinterpretation of the principle. The sources are extremely careful to distinguish between a passive wish and an active obsession. Wishing will not bring riches.
Exactly.
Desiring them with a state of mind that becomes an obsession, and then crucially planning definite ways and means to acquire them, and backing those plans with a persistence that simply does not recognize the word failure. That is the actual machinery.
To use a historical parallel mentioned in the text, imagine a warrior landing his troops on an enemy shore. The first order he gives is to burn the ships that brought them there.
Burn the ships.
He turns to his men and says, "We win or we perish." He isn't relying on magic. He is forcing human psychology into a corner where it must produce extraordinary solutions because failure literally means death.
It's about engineering necessity. And to give this concept a rigid structure, the material lays out 6 very specific, practical steps to transmute desire into physical reality. Now, I'm not going to just read you a dry list because we need to understand the psychology behind these steps.
Right. The why behind it.
Exactly. The first step is to fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. Not, I want plenty of money or I want to be rich. It has to be an exact number. Why is the human brain so terrible at processing ambiguous goals?
Because the subconscious mind operates much like a targeted missile system. If you tell a missile to just fly somewhere over there, it will wander and crash. If you give it exact coordinates, it can adjust its trajectory to hit the target. Ambiguity creates a lack of urgency.
That makes a lot of sense.
When you demand a specific number, say $1 million, you give the mind a measurable metric. It can start reverse engineering the steps required to hit that exact metric.
That leads directly into the second step, which I think is where most modern self-help completely falls apart.
Yeah.
The second step is determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money. The text explicitly states there is no such reality as something for nothing.
Which completely grounds this philosophy in economics and reality. Wealth is a byproduct of value creation. If you demand wealth without defining the immense value you plan to inject into the world in return, you aren't demonstrating a burning desire. You are demonstrating entitlement.
Wow, yeah.
You have to identify your vehicle of service.
Then you establish a definite date to possess it, create a definite plan to carry it out, and begin at once, whether you feel ready or not. You write all this down in a clear statement. But it's the final step that bridges us into the deep psychology of this deep dive.
Step 6.
The 6th step demands that you read this written statement aloud twice daily, once before sleep and once waking up. And as you read, you must see, feel, and believe yourself already in possession of the money.
That is the vital bridge. A burning desire is the engine of achievement, but an engine needs a steering mechanism. You have to program your own mind to accept that this desire is not just possible, but inevitable. You have to engage what the sources refer to as the head chemist of the mind.
So we are moving from the spark of desire into the actual mental alchemy. Let's look at this chemist: faith and autosuggestion.
Faith in this context is not necessarily religious. It is described as a state of mind that can be induced or created by repeated instructions to the subconscious mind. This mechanism is called autosuggestion.
Okay.
It is the sole agency of communication between the conscious reasoning mind and the vast, powerful subconscious.
This is where people get tripped up with affirmations, right? They
Yeah.
stand in front of a mirror and say, I am a successful entrepreneur. But they feel like a fraud while they say it. Repeating plain, unemotional words is like reading a recipe out loud and expecting a cake to magically appear on your kitchen counter.
That's a great analogy.
You have to actually mix the ingredients, the emotions, to bake the reality. The material is explicit, plain, unemotional words do not influence the subconscious mind.
Precisely. The subconscious mind only acts upon thoughts that have been emotionalized. It is deaf to logic. And the emotion of faith, or absolute belief, is the strongest catalyst. What is deeply fascinating here from a cognitive perspective is the concept of deceiving your own subconscious mind.
Deceiving it.
Yeah. The text suggests you must convince your subconscious that you believe you will receive what you ask for. You must conduct yourself exactly as you would if you were already in possession of the goal.
Let me stop you there because that creates a fascinating paradox. If the subconscious can't tell the difference between reality and imagination, how do you prevent yourself from becoming delusional?
That's the risk.
How do you balance acting like a millionaire with the reality that you still have to pay your electric bill today?
You avoid delusion by tying the belief directly to the action plan we discussed in the 6 steps. You aren't ignoring the electric bill. You are removing the anxiety surrounding the electric bill by adopting the emotional posture of someone who has already solved the broader financial puzzle.
Okay, I see.
The human brain experiences cognitive dissonance when internal beliefs don't match external reality. By forcing the internal belief to vibrate at the frequency of success, the brain becomes profoundly uncomfortable with your current external poverty, and it begins working overtime to spot opportunities, generate ideas, and drive actions to close that gap.
The story of Charles M. Schwab perfectly demonstrates this transfer of belief. We were talking about the creation of the United States Steel Corporation. One of the biggest corporate monopolies in history didn't start in a boardroom or a factory. It started at a dinner party at the University Club in New York.
The historical context is vital here. At the time, the American steel industry was incredibly fragmented. It was run by dozens of competing barons who were engaged in ruinous, petty price wars. It was inefficient and chaotic.
Just a mess.
Total mess. Schwab, who is a brilliant 38-year-old executive working for Andrew Carnegie, saw a vision of a consolidated, highly efficient megacorporation that could dominate the global market. But he needed immense capital. He needed J.P. Morgan.
The big guns.
Exactly. So Schwab mixes his idea with absolute, unwavering faith. He secures an invitation to this elite dinner where the biggest financial titans of the day, including Morgan, are present.
Picture the room. These are the wealthiest, most cynical men in the country. Morgan is probably chomping on a cigar, completely unimpressed by everything. Schwab stands up to deliver an after-dinner speech. He speaks for maybe an hour, but in that hour, he alters the course of American industrial history.
He paints a picture.
A picture of this mega corporation that is so vivid, so fiercely logical, and backed by such profound emotional intensity and belief that the skepticism in the room just melts. He wasn't just sharing a business plan. He was transmitting his faith into the minds of the people who could make it happen.
And it worked.
J.P. Morgan, the ultimate skeptic, ends up pulling Schwab aside and saying, if you can guarantee the Carnegie properties can be bought, I will finance the deal.
Yeah.
Schwab literally imagined a billion-dollar empire into existence through the sheer force of emotionalized autosuggestion.
It is a triumph of positive autosuggestion. But we must be equally vigilant about the danger of negative autosuggestion.
Oh, absolutely.
The subconscious mind makes absolutely no distinction between constructive and destructive thought impulses. It will translate a thought driven by fear into physical reality just as efficiently and ruthlessly as it will translate a thought driven by courage.
That's terrifying.
If you constantly feed your mind doubt, worry, and a belief in your own inferiority, your subconscious will accept that as the blueprint. It will orchestrate your actions, your body language, and your decisions to manifest failure with absolute precision.
It's like the wind. The exact same wind can carry one ship east and another ship west. It entirely depends on how you set your sails. Worrying is essentially praying for what you don't want. Okay, so we have the desire, which is the engine. We have the faith in autosuggestion, which is the steering wheel. But once the subconscious mind is primed and starts working, it needs raw materials to build the actual plan. It needs bricks and mortar. And that brings us to the mental workshop, specialized knowledge and imagination.
This section draws a critical distinction that really challenges our modern educational paradigms. General knowledge, no matter how vast or impressive, the kind you get from acquiring multiple university degrees, rarely creates wealth on its own.
Yeah, being book smart isn't enough.
The text points out that most university professors possess immense general knowledge, but they are rarely wealthy themselves. They specialize in the teaching of knowledge, but not necessarily in the organization or application of it toward wealth creation. Wealth requires specialized knowledge that is highly organized and intelligently directed toward a definite end.
The story of Henry Ford on the witness stand in a libel suit is wild, and it perfectly illustrates this. Ford is suing a newspaper for calling him an ignorant pacifist. So he's on the stand, and these opposing lawyers are trying to prove to the jury that he actually is ignorant because he didn't have much formal schooling. They start peppering him with these obscure, trivial, historical questions. They're asking him things like, who was Benedict Arnold? And how many soldiers did the British send over to put down the American rebellion?
They are trying to humiliate him.
Oh, totally. Just exposing his lack of general knowledge. And Ford takes it for a while, but eventually he gets fed up. He leans forward and points out a devastatingly simple truth. He tells the lawyers that he has a row of electric push buttons on his desk. If he needs the answer to any specialized question regarding his business or the world, he simply pushes a button and summons an expert who has devoted their life to that specific knowledge.
So smart.
He asks the lawyers, why should I clutter up my mind with general knowledge for the purpose of being able to answer questions when I have men around me who can supply any knowledge I require?
That is such a mic drop moment.
Right. But let's really think about what this means for us today. In a modern world where we are literally drowning in general information, where we hold the entirety of human knowledge on a smartphone in our pockets, Doesn't this mean the ultimate skill isn't knowing facts, but rather being the architect who knows how to arrange them?
Exactly. It completely redefines what it means to be educated. The text states that an educated person is not necessarily one who has an abundance of general knowledge. An educated person is one who has so developed the faculties of their mind that they may acquire anything they want without violating the rights of others.
Yeah.
Ford proved that you don't need to hold the knowledge in your own brain, provided you know how to organize and direct the experts who do.
And the space where that organization happens is the imagination, and at the literal workshop of the human mind. The sources split imagination into two distinct types: synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Let's break those down.
Synthetic imagination is the faculty of arranging old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. It doesn't create anything fundamentally new out of thin air. It works entirely with the material of past experience, education, and observation.
Okay, so rearranging the puzzle pieces.
Yes. The vast majority of inventors and business people rely almost exclusively on synthetic imagination.
The story of Asa Candler is the ultimate example of this. Candler was a drugstore clerk. He didn't invent anything, but he bought an old brass kettle, a wooden paddle, and a secret formula from a country doctor.
The Coca-Cola formula.
Exactly. Now, the doctor knew he had a tasty headache remedy, but he lacked imagination. Candler, however, mixed that formula with synthetic imagination. He saw the potential to market it globally as a refreshing beverage. He took existing elements, sugar, water, a formula, and marketing, and rearranged them. That is how the Coca-Cola empire was built. He took what was already there and synthesized a staggering fortune.
Conversely, creative imagination is described as something far more profound. It is portrayed as the direct link between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence. It is the faculty through which sudden hunches and deep inspirations are received. The text suggests this faculty operates only when the conscious mind is vibrating at an exceedingly high rate, usually stimulated by a strong emotion or a burning desire.
I love the example of Dr. Frank Gonzalez here. He was a young preacher with a burning desire to reform the entire educational system. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He needed $1 million to build a new type of college. He didn't have a dime to his name.
Not a dime.
But he used his creative imagination to craft a sermon titled, "What I Would Do If I Had $1 Million." He didn't just write a speech. He visualized the college. He felt the reality of it. He stepped into the pulpit and delivered that sermon with such intense conviction, such a high vibratory rate of emotion, that the moment he finished, a man stood up the congregation, walked to the front, and said, "I believe you can do everything you said. I will give you the $1 million."
Oh.
That man was Philip D. Armour, the wealthy meat packer, and that single act of creative imagination built the Armour Institute of Technology.
It is the literal transmutation of an intangible idea into physical bricks and mortar. And what is brilliant about the source material is that it doesn't just leave these as grand historical anecdotes.
Right, it makes it practical.
It offers very practical modern applications.
Ah.
Specifically regarding the sale of personal services. There is an incredible case study about a woman who saw her son struggling to find a job after college. She didn't just tell him to blindly blast his resume to 100 HR departments. She acted as his mental architect.
Yes, she created this exhaustive, highly specialized portfolio for him. She put together a 50-page, beautifully typed document that detailed his native abilities, his schooling, his personal experiences. But more importantly, she didn't just ask for a job.
She presented a plan.
She provided a complete description of the exact executive position he wanted, and a definite, synthesized plan for exactly how you would fill it and bring value to the company. She even went out and researched his prospective employer's competitors to gather vital market intelligence to include in his plan.
She applied definiteness of purpose, specialized knowledge, and synthetic imagination, and the result. It landed him a prime executive role, starting far higher up the corporate ladder than he ever would have if he had just applied normally.
Which is amazing.
Which brings up a highly counterintuitive point from the text, the idea that starting at the bottom is actually a trap.
We are always told that. Start at the bottom, put your head down, and work your way up. But the text argues that the outlook from the bottom is terrible. It kills off ambition. It breeds a rut mentality where you just accept your daily monotonous routine and stop looking for ways to innovate.
You get stuck.
If you use your imagination to start a few steps up, you place yourself in a position to actually observe opportunity, to see how the people above you get ahead, and to embrace those opportunities without being crushed by the grind of the bottom rung.
But having the raw materials of specialized knowledge and the blueprints drawn up by your imagination is utterly useless without a construction crew. A blueprint sitting on a desk never built a house. It is time to crystallize these thoughts into physical, organized action.
Which means we are crossing the bridge from thought to reality. Organized planning and decision. You cannot do this alone. The very first step of organized planning is forming what the text calls a mastermind alliance.
The mastermind is formally defined as the coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose.
Okay.
The sources are unequivocal on this point. No single human being has enough experience, education, or native ability to amass a great fortune entirely alone. You must surround yourself with people whose specialized knowledge compensates for your own inevitable weaknesses.
But let's talk about the friction of executing a plan. What happens when the plan fails? Because if you are attempting something massive, it will fail.
Guaranteed.
The text is very clear that temporary defeat is not permanent failure. It simply means your plan was fundamentally flawed in some way. We talked about Edison earlier. He famously failed 10,000 times before perfecting the incandescent light bulb.
Right. The logic is clinical. If the first plan fails, replace it with a new one. If that new plan fails, replace it again. Keep replacing the vehicle until you find one that works. This is precisely where the majority of people meet with permanent failure. They lack the persistence to create new plans.
They just give up.
To use a maritime analogy, a leader moving by guesswork without a continually refined plan is like a ship without a rudder. It might have a massive, powerful engine of desire, but without the rudder of organized planning, it is inevitably going to crash on the rocks.
If you are selling your personal services, whether you are an entrepreneur pitching clients or an employee trying to become indispensable, the text provides a behavioral blueprint called the QQS formula: quality, quantity, and spirit of service. Quality means performing every detail of your role as efficiently as possible. Quantity means developing the habit of rendering all the service you are capable of giving. But let's focus on spirit.
Spirit is arguably the most critical component and the one most often ignored. It means the habit of agreeable, harmonious conduct. Adequacy of quality and quantity is simply not enough to maintain a permanent market for your services if your conduct repels people.
Right. Nobody wants to work with a jerk.
A genius with a toxic, negative personality cannot induce cooperation. If you destroy the harmony of your mastermind group or your workplace, your quality and quantity become irrelevant.
And what is the biggest killer of these organized plans? It's not a lack of talent. It is procrastination, the profound lack of decision. The author analyzed the data of 25,000 people who experienced failure, and lack of decision was near the very top of the list of the 30 major causes of failure.
That's a huge sample size.
The contrast is stark. Wealthy, successful people reach decisions promptly, and they change those decisions very, very slowly, if at all. People who fail decide very slowly, and they change their minds constantly.
Henry Ford was legendary for this specific trait. Think about his borderline obstinacy with the Model T. His own advisors begged him to change it. The market and the customers were starting to demand new designs in different colors.
You can have any color as long as it's black.
Right, but Ford reached decisions quickly and changed them with agonizing slowness. Now, while historians argue he may have delayed a bit too long eventually, the sources argue that this firmness of decision is exactly what yielded his unimaginable fortune in the first place. For the purpose of achievement, borderline obstinacy is vastly preferable to wishy-washy indecision.
Let's look at the ultimate historical example of decision. Think about the 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. When they put their names on that parchment, they weren't just making a political statement.
It was treason.
They reached a definite decision knowing full well that if they failed, that piece of paper would literally be their death warrant. They would be hanged for treason. It takes an incredibly hardened mental armor to make a decision with those stakes and stick to it without wavering.
Making a firm decision is indeed the crucial first step, but maintaining that decision when the entire world pushes back, when you face economic ruin, public ridicule, or simply the daily exhausting grind of slow progress, that requires the activation of the next major principle in our deep dive: persistence.
This is the crucible of success. Persistence is the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. It is the blending of raw willpower with a burning desire.
The material states a sad reality. The majority of people are ready to throw their aims and purposes overboard at the very first sign of opposition or misfortune. Only a very small minority carry on, despite all opposition, until they attain their goal. The text uses a brilliant metallurgical metaphor. Persistence is to the character of man what carbon is to steel. It is the hardening agent.
I love the story of the writer Fannie Hurst in this section. She comes to New York with a burning desire to be a great writer. For 4 grueling years, she faces nothing but rejection.
4 years of no.
She gets the dreaded no slip from editors over and over and over again. Most people would have quit after 3 months, convinced they lacked talent. But she had this relentless carbon steel persistence. Finally, the tide turns, one piece gets accepted, and she goes on to conquer Broadway and the publishing world. Or think of the singer Kate Smith singing for free, just taking the punishment of the industry until she finally broke through and could demand her own price.
But persistence isn't just blind endurance. It requires a specific psychological framework to maintain that level of energy. The sources outline 4 definite steps to develop it.
What are they?
First, a definite purpose backed by burning desire. Second, a definite plan expressed in continuous action. Third, a mind closed tightly against all negative and discouraging influences, including the well-meaning pity of friends and family. And fourth, a friendly alliance, a mastermind to constantly encourage you to follow through.
Wait, hold on. I need to challenge this because there is a very fine line here.
Yeah.
How do you distinguish between noble, heroic persistence and just being blindly, foolishly stubborn about a plan that clearly isn't working?
It's a fair question.
If my definite purpose is to dig for gold in my apartment bathtub, no amount of carbon steel persistence is going to make it happen. I'm just going to ruin my plumbing.
That is a fantastic pushback, and the answer lies precisely in the interplay between the mastermind concept and organized planning. Persistence applies strictly to the goal, the definite purpose. But the plans to reach that goal must remain flexible and must be routinely subjected to the critical scrutiny of your trusted, harmonious allies.
Oh, I see.
If a plan is fundamentally flawed like digging for gold in a bathtub, your mastermind group will intervene and help you see the flaw. You persist in the desire to achieve wealth, but you willingly change the vehicle you use to get there. Stubbornness clings to a broken plan. Persistence clings to the ultimate goal.
That makes perfect sense. The goal is sacred, the plan is disposable. This brings us to a really fascinating aspect of the mastermind. It isn't just about splitting the workload or getting good advice. The text argues it actually changes the way your brain functions.
As a psychic phase.
Yeah, the material talks about the dual nature of the mastermind. There's the economic side, the practical cooperation we just discussed. But then there's this deeply esoteric psychic phase.
Yes. The psychic phase is where the text moves from pure pragmatism into the realm of profound psychological phenomena. The text posits a bold theory that no 2 minds ever come together without, thereby creating a third, invisible, intangible force, which may be likened to a third mind.
Like a hive mind.
It uses the analogy of a battery. A single battery provides a certain limited amount of energy. But when you link a group of batteries or brains together in a circuit of perfect harmony, they amplify the available energy for everyone in the group. You experience a collective surge in creative capacity. We might call this group flow or collective intelligence today.
So, to truly sustain this level of energy, to tap into this amplified third mind, we have to access the deepest, most potent emotional frequencies available to human biology. We're moving into the mechanics of the unseen forces: transmutation, the subconscious, and the brain.
The foundational premise here is that the human mind responds to stimuli that increase its vibratory rate. When the mind is vibrating at an exceedingly high rate, driven by intense emotion, it pierces through ordinary limitations and becomes capable of creative imagination and tapping into what the author calls infinite intelligence.
This leads to the concept of transmuting emotions. The material specifically lists the strongest human emotions: the desire for sex expression, love, a burning desire for money, music, and romance. It argues these drives can be transmuted. Now let's unpack that, especially the focus on sexual energy, because it can sound very strange to a modern ear.
It can, yeah.
What does it actually mean to transmute an emotion?
It is about leveraging your own biological and psychological drives rather than being controlled by them. The author observed that sexual desire is the most powerful of human desires. When driven by it, people develop exceptional imagination, courage, and willpower. Transmutation simply means redirecting the mind from thoughts of physical expression toward thoughts of some other creative effort.
Okay, so rechanneling it.
If you take that massive high vibration emotional energy and funnel it through willpower into your business plan or your art, it acts as an unmatched creative fuel. In modern terms, we are talking about redirecting the brain's massive dopamine reward system toward your long-term goals.
It's turning raw biological horsepower into focused torque. The text lists 7 major positive emotions: desire, faith, love, sex, enthusiasm, romance, and hope. These are the premium fuels you must use to voluntarily feed your subconscious mind. Conversely, there are 7 major negative emotions: fear, jealousy, hatred, revenge, greed, superstition, and anger.
And the subconscious mind is the ultimate bridge. It works continuously day and night, whether you consciously direct it or not. If you do not proactively plant those positive emotions in the fertile garden of your subconscious, the weeds of those negative emotions will grow automatically, fed by the ambient anxiety of daily life. The subconscious translates your dominant emotionalized thoughts and broadcasts them to the universe.
This brings us to a wild concept: the brain as a broadcasting and receiving station. The text references the famous extrasensory perception, or ESP, experiments conducted by Dr. J.B. Rhine at Duke University. It suggests that thoughts are literally energy vibrating at a high rate, and the ether picks up these vibrations and transmits them to receptive minds.
Now, whether a modern listener believes in literal telepathic energy vibrations traveling through the ether, or whether we view this through the psychological reality of confirmation bias and the reticular activating system, where a highly focused mind naturally spots microexpressions, opportunities, and patterns that a distracted mind misses, the practical mechanical outcome is exactly the same.
The result is the same.
A mind intensely focused on a goal begins to pick up signals and forge connections that seem almost miraculous.
And this provides a fascinating framework for why prayers often fail, according to the sources. Most people only pray or ask for help when everything else has failed. Therefore, they approach the infinite with minds absolutely saturated with fear and doubt. The subconscious mind takes that dominant emotion, fear, translates it, and broadcasts it.
So you manifest exactly what you dreaded.
Because fear was the actual emotion driving the request.
Precisely. The subconscious does not listen to your words, it listens to your frequency.
So to use a modern technology analogy, the human brain is effectively a biological router. The subconscious mind is the sending station, the creative imagination is the receiving antenna, and autosuggestion is the software program we use to tune the frequency.
That is a remarkably accurate synthesis of the mental machinery. When this biological hardware and software are perfectly aligned, the mind unlocks a level of perception and capability that defies ordinary explanation.
But there are ghosts guarding the door to that capability. We are entering the final and perhaps most vital phase of our deep dive: the apex and the enemy, the sixth sense and the ghosts of fear.
The apex of this entire philosophy is what the text calls the sixth sense. It is described as the door to the temple of wisdom. Through the mastery of the preceding principles, the sixth sense activates. It is the faculty where the mind is voluntarily warned of impending dangers in time to avoid them, and notified of fleeting opportunities in time to embrace them.
The author describes a truly unorthodox practice for developing this sense. He talks about his invisible counselors. Every night, just before going to sleep, he would hold an imaginary cabinet meeting.
This part is fascinating.
He would envision himself sitting around a boardroom table with historical figures he deeply admired: Ralph Waldo Emerson, Thomas Paine, Charles Darwin, Abraham Lincoln, and Thomas Edison. He would address them each by name and ask to absorb their specific defining qualities. He would ask Lincoln for his sense of justice, Darwin for his patient ability to study cause and effect, Edison for his faith.
He was using this as a systematic, highly visual method of rebuilding his own character through autosuggestion.
I have to ask a hard question here because this sounds like a hallucination. Is the author actually claiming to be holding seances and speaking to the literal ghosts of Abraham Lincoln and Charles Darwin? Or is this the ultimate psychological hack, using historical archetypes to access the deepest, most intuitive parts of his own creative imagination?
The text maintains a very careful, objective balance on this point. The author explicitly states that he regards his cabinet meetings as being purely imaginary, an exercise in profound self-suggestion. However, he also notes that the results, the sudden, brilliant ideas, the insights, the flashes of inspiration he received during these sessions felt very real and seemed to arrive from outside his own conscious, reasoning mind.
Interesting.
Again, whether we attribute this to literal communication with infinite intelligence or view it as a profound unlocking of the subconscious mind via Jungian archetypes, the mechanical result is identical: the generation of highly actionable, transformative ideas.
But to access this temple of wisdom, you have to defeat the enemies standing at the gates. The 6 basic fears that paralyze human success. They are the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love, the fear of old age, and the fear of death.
These fears are incredibly insidious because they rarely announce themselves. They often exist purely in the subconscious mind as a low-level hum of anxiety. They are ghosts that sabotage our actions silently.
Like invisible barriers.
Let's look at the fear of criticism. From an evolutionary standpoint, being criticized meant being cast out of the tribe, which meant death. Today, that fear misfires in the corporate world or in entrepreneurship. It destroys initiative. It stops people from pitching the idea, writing the book, or starting the business purely out of dread of what relatives or strangers might say.
And the fear of poverty brings a total paralysis of ambition. These fears breed what the author brilliantly calls the 57 alibis. We all know them. If I had money, if times were better, if I had a better education, if I didn't have a family to support. These are the rationalizations people use to justify their own failure and protect their egos.
The root of all these fears, according to the psychological breakdown in the text, is the blending of indecision and doubt. Indecision crystallizes into doubt, and the two blend together to become fear. This toxic cocktail creates old man worry, a disease of mass indecision that spreads rapidly, particularly during times of economic downturn or global crisis.
So we've diagnosed the disease. What is the cure? How do you actually bust these ghosts out of your subconscious?
The ultimate absolute cure for fear is decision. You sever the root. You conquer the fear of death by reaching a firm decision to accept it as an inescapable event. You conquer the fear of poverty by reaching a definitive decision to live without worry, regardless of your current financial state, and focusing entirely on your plan for wealth.
Just deciding it's handled.
You conquer the fear of criticism by deciding, once and for all, not to worry about what other people think, do, or say about your ambitions. When you make a true decision, you eliminate indecision and doubt, causing the ghost of fear to simply evaporate for lack of nourishment.
That is incredibly powerful. Let's pull all this immense machinery together. We have gone incredibly deep today into the anatomy of achievement. We started by tracing the raw spark. Everything begins with an intensely burning, bridge-burning desire. That desire cannot remain vague. It must be crystallized into a definite, written plan.
That plan must then be fueled by absolute faith, driven deep into the subconscious mind through the emotional repetition of autosuggestion. It must be executed with carbon steel persistence, willing to accept temporary defeat, but never permanent failure.
And crucially, it cannot be done alone. It must be amplified by the harmonious alliance of a mastermind group, leveraging specialized knowledge and the creative imagination to continually test and refine your approach until the goal is inevitably met.
The text leaves us with a profound, almost chilling provocation. It reads, "Life is a checkerboard, and the player opposite you is time. If you hesitate before moving, or neglect to move promptly, your men will be wiped off the board by time. You are playing against a partner who will not tolerate indecision."
You possess the master key that unlocks the door to life's bountiful riches, and that key is your absolute control over your own thoughts. It is the only thing in this chaotic universe that you truly have complete control over. Remember the biological router. Your subconscious is broadcasting right now. The only question is, are you tuning it to the frequency of fear, or are you going to step up, make a decision, and force life to pay whatever price you demand? Do not let time wipe you off the board.